What's up, everyone? On this great Easter morning, make a video today. Yeah, on Easter morning. And what do we celebrate on Easter morning other than Jesus rising from the dead and saving us from our sins? We got eggs. We got eggs. So yeah, had a little Easter egg hunt this morning. But what does that have to do with fishing? Yeah, springtime, the spawn, eggs, fish eggs, all that stuff, right? There's a little correlation there, I guess. I'm gonna make one real quick video about this because I see a lot of this and it comes up a lot when we talk about the spawn. So what I see a lot of times this time of the year are people not understanding the spawn, or I wouldn't even say not understanding it. They sometimes are trying to figure out what's going on in the spawn. And there's a lot that goes on in the spawn. And a lot what happens is it gets confusing at times because you go out there and things start to happen that you're not used to, right? You go out there, it's beautiful, it's nice outside, it's warm, there's no fish on beds. And so what happens is this time of the year, things change, and it's one of the few times of the year that like it changes every day. Like every day can be different. It's kind of why we like fishing. You know, you get into the wintertime and the summertime, and it's cold every single day. Every single day, it's the same temperature. Nothing changes. You get in the summertime and it's 90 something degrees, 100 degrees every single day, dead sun. Here we get cold fronts, warm fronts, right? We get wind, you get pollen, everything's changing constantly. The temperatures are always up and down because the weather is so unstable. It gets fish doing a lot of different things. And what happens is the spawn, we would like for it to be consistent. And we would like to know what the fish are doing consistently through the spawn, but that's never the case. And so what happens is we see a lot of different times where fish spawn. The one time of the year that I was always able to base everything of my knowledge off of was the spawn because of these right here. I was always looking in the water. Before live scope, everything that we ever viewed on fishing was based off of like how we caught fish or kind of what we thought was happening. So in the summertime, if you went out there and caught fish in 25 foot of water, you're like, oh, all the fish are out deep. Well, they're all out deep because you're catching them out deep, right? Or you think they're all out deep because you had this monster bag out deep, or you caught a bunch of fish out deep. And you're thinking, you get home and you tell your buddies or your friends, and you're like, hey, how'd you catch them? Like, oh man, they're all out deep. They're all out deep, man. We crushed on them out deep. And you did. You weren't lying. Problem is, there was some guy like me going around throwing a frog up shallow, crushing them on up shallow. And I'm going, hey man, there's a bunch of fish shallow. And I wasn't lying. There was a bunch of fish shallow. There was a bunch of fish shallow and a bunch of fish deep. Well, that's going on in the spawn too. There's a bunch of fish shallow, a bunch of fish deep, a bunch of fish in between. There's a bunch of fish spawning. There's a bunch of pre-spawners, and there's probably a bunch of post-spawners, all going on at once. And so what I hear from a lot of people sometimes is like, oh man, they start catching fish and they base their view on the spawn of how they catch the fish. And I want to tell you all, just be careful of that. And here's why. So right now it's Easter. And so many people will tell you, oh man, like the spawn's done, there's empty beds everywhere. Well, there's a lot of reasons there might be empty beds. I'll explain real quick. Here's some reasons why you see empty beds. One is, during the spawn, the first ones to spawn extremely shallow, like very shallow, like less than a foot. Like most places we ever go, like if you want to see one, like the first one to ever get up on a bed, they'll never be deep. They're always shallow. They're shallow because that's the warmest water. They're trying to get as high to the water column as possible because the sun's hitting that part of the water. If they go deeper, it's harder for the sun to get them, it's not as warm. So you'll always see fish shallower. Okay, so you might have seen some beds up there that are super shallow. Those are the first ones to spawn. Well, they might have spawned 3 weeks ago. Now there's not a very big group that spawns right off the bat. I don't know where all this thing came up of like the biggest fish spawn early. I've never seen that to be the case ever. I don't know why that's a myth. So I'm gonna say that's is all the years I've been sight fishing, I've never seen that be the case. Okay. 2, you get all those fish spawning, and then you get a cold front, and that usually pushes them off the bank. They stop spawning. So a lot of times you might go out there and maybe it's been 3 weeks into the spawn and there's fish everywhere on beds and a cold front comes through. And then you have a cold front for 2 or 3 days, then it gets cloudy for 2 days. And it's not really warm. It feels kind of warm, but the water's really not that warm. Well, over those 4 or 5 days, all those fish have just eventually started getting off the beds. They've made a whole bunch of beds. And now you go out there and it's a day like today, it's cloudy, it's warm, but it hasn't really been warm. So you go out there and you're thinking, man, it feels good. Like maybe you have a t-shirt on, you know, and you're like, man, it's warm outside, but the water's not really that warm. And it's not that it still might be 60 something degrees, the water temp, but it might've been 70 before, right? So it might've been 70 7 or 8 days ago, and now it's dropped down to 62. Well, I've always said fish like to spawn when it hits 60, but they also know that it was 72 or 70 and it just keeps dropping. And so they're kind of worried. They're going, is it going to drop below 60? I better move off the beds, right? They also know when it hits 60, it hits 60. It was 56, 57, and all of a sudden it's finally hit 60. So they know the trend is warming. So they're like, hey, if it's already hit 60, tomorrow it might be hitting 61, 62. Like they follow the trend, just like they follow the trend up and down. So you go out there and you're looking around and it's a beautiful, beautiful day. And you're going, the fish, there's beds everywhere and they're all empty. Like they're already done. I missed it. No, you didn't miss it. They're just in that transition of it pushed them off. And watch, you go out there in a day or two and it's dead sunny and every single one of those beds will be absolutely full of fish. Is what happened to me at Toledo. I didn't go sight fishing until the very last day. I went for a little bit the day before and saw almost none. Just because I had a big bag, I was able to go do it and I found like one fish very end of the day. I went back the next day, went to that fish, caught that fish and saw hundreds. There were empty beds all the day before and then there were hundreds back up there. We had finally gotten sun. We had had a day of warm weather and they were pushing like crazy. And I talked to some people now that have been on Toledo and they're like, oh my gosh, they're everywhere. But you heard a lot of people in that event talk about a lot of empty beds and guys were catching some post spawners. And they're like, man, we might be thinking that the spawn is done. No, here's why. And this is the main point I like to tell y'all. What happens is I'm always looking in the water. So I don't go based off of the fish I catch or anything. I'm doing it solely based because I can visually see what's been going on. A lot of people view it off of what they catch. So if you're out there and you got some guy out there Carolina rigging pre-spawn spots, right? Secondary points and things like that, that guy's catching nothing but pre-spawners. He's sitting here going, man, and he's crushing them. He's sitting here going, man, look at these none of these fish have spawned. He could be looking at it going, there's not even fish on the bank. They're all out here. Look at how many I'm catching. The guy right over there, there's a shad spawn going on because it's warm. And he's up there, like throwing up there in like 5 foot of water, catching all post spawners. And it's the shad spawn going on. He's catching post spawners and he's sitting there going, oh my gosh, no wonder they're not on beds. They're all out here. They're all post spawners. Look, I caught 30 today. And they're all post spawners. None of those guys were lying. They were both right. And then you got me up there seeing 200 fish on beds. You see what I'm saying? Be careful on what you think about the spawn based on the fish you're catching. Because what happens is you're just fishing a pattern that catches post spawners, or you're fishing a pattern that catches pre-spawners, right? Me, I don't look at it either way. I just go up there and look at it as going, I see fish, right? So I kind of have an idea of what's been going on. I can see what's going on. I can see that there's been some fish that are post-spawn. I can see some fish that are still trying to move up, and I see fish on beds. Before live scope, all we used to do was guess. We used to guess a lot of times what fish were doing, and guess what? We were always guessing wrong for the most part. Live scope has showed us that that's not the case because we finally got to see a little bit. We don't get to see like I get to see, because I get to see visually with my eyes. Like I'm not looking through a graph or a computer. I'm looking through with my eyes. But even with live scope, we're like, oh, that fish is out here in 40 foot of water, 8 foot down. We didn't really know that. We might take a guess because we were out there throwing a jerkbait in 40 foot of water, but we didn't do that very much, right? So we're getting to see with live scope a lot of things. It's teaching us some things. But like I said, for the spawn, I just use these. I've always just used these, and then I determine what I'm seeing based on that. So like I said, it can get you in trouble sometimes. Sometimes that you think something's going on just because of how you caught fish. So be aware of that. You know, make sure that that's not the case. In the springtime, don't just look at the day you're fishing. Like, don't just go, hey, look at today. It's cloudy, it's warm. This is what's going on. Always look 4 or 5 days earlier. That's your most important days. Try to figure out what's been going on before you get out there. Those fish know. They see the trends. They don't have the weatherman getting it wrong all the time. All they do is base on like every day it warms a little bit, that water warms. They're sitting there going, hey, as long as it's warming, I'm gonna push up. If it keeps getting colder every day, guess what? They're gonna push off. And as it gets warm again, it might take them a couple days. You might feel really good, right? It might feel phenomenal for you, but for them, the water temp hasn't changed. It takes them a couple days. It takes a little bit of sun, takes some things like that going on. So just keep that in mind. Look at the days before you're gonna go fishing and see what the trend is. If it's been a lot of cloudy days, not a lot of sun, good chance there's not a lot of fish up. If it's been sunny every day, good chance you're gonna have a lot of fish up. Things like that. That's my advice on this Sunday morning. Guys, I hope you all enjoy y'all's Easter. I know I already have. And things coming up, I'm trying to get together all my Toledo Bend footage, and then my buddy Blake and me fished a tournament on Lake Tyler. That video is going to be awesome. I'm just going to let y'all know. All right, stay tuned for those, guys. See y'all.